Us on talkSPORT with Mark Pugac and the former Republic of Ireland striker Tony Cascarino. Let's have a look at another game today. And despite their poor form, Tottenham are looking to play European football next season, and they take on a Burnley side who are fighting for survival.
And as fate are decided from the top and the bottom of the Premier League, it's now or never.
And Pochettino punishes Postecoglou once again. May just have crushed his Champions League dream.
I just think they're too easy to play against.
They are so open. Someone said at the start of the season, Spurs are going to finish fifth. Don't want to use the word success, but that's massive progression.
The belief is there in what we're trying to be and who we're trying to be. Where that takes us this year or beyond, time will tell.
For us, the final day of the season is Saturday against Tottenham.
The problem is with Burnley, I've not seen enough balance.
3 goals behind and they're heading 5 points from safety. It's Burnley 1, Newcastle 4.
It's pathetic. I mean, Burnley's fall apart. I mean, what's going on here? You've got a chance of staying in the Premier League. You see him playing out from the back games. It's actually embarrassing to watch.
So much still to be decided, and we hope you can join us on the talkSPORT network.
Let's speak then to Chris Cowlin from the Spurs Chat podcast about what's going on at Tottenham. Chris, good morning to you.
Hi, Chris. Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Tony. I hope you're well. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, of course it is frustrating that we've lost 4 games on the trot in the Premier League, but you've got to look at the overall picture. At the start of the season, if you'd have asked any Spurs fan if you can finish 4th or 5th in the Premier League this year, Harry Kane going, Ange Postecoglou's first season, etc., the problems that we've had off the pitch with injuries and players going off, to competitions mid-season, I think it's been a successful season. However, I do think that the board heavily need to back Ange Postecoglou. They've given him a 4-year deal. This is obviously a long-term plan. I love Ange Postecoglou in press conferences. I love the fact that he always speaks about the future. But the proof is in the pudding now. Transfer windows since Ange's arrival has been really good. That does need to continue. Of course, whilst I don't like, watching Spurs losing game after game, particularly against the likes of Chelsea and Arsenal, our biggest rivals, there has been progression this year.
Chris, I was at Stamford Bridge for the Chelsea game, and I was at Anfield last week for the game against Liverpool. Now, the only thing I would have concerns about is that Spurs started the season brilliantly, and everybody bought into and seemed to understand what Ange wanted to do and play, and they did it really well. As the seasons wore on, you've come away from that slightly, and it looked even more open than it was at the start of the season. Now, I understand injuries and, like you said, players going to competitions and not being available. I understand that. But what I saw at Anfield is that you're giving, and at Stamford Bridge, you're giving so many chances to the opposition without the goals you're conceding, but chances in the numbers, that's not sustainable.
Tony, I completely agree. That Chelsea game for me was really gutting because I just don't think there was enough heart and desire from some of the players there, and that is the issue. There are still a lot of players there that are not Postecoglou players, and it is about consistency, as you well know, playing in the Premier League before. And these players have got to be consistent week after week after week, and we need the players to do that. We need to improve on the players. I think this season was all about trying to get back into Europe and showing the fans, from Postecoglou's perspective, showing the fans what type of football we can play. We know what type of football we can play, but I think he does need the right personnel in who can be consistent, week after week. He says a number of times in the press conferences, a number of players like Vicario, Destiny Udogie, Van der Ven, it's their first season in the Premier League, so they've bedded in extremely well. We've seen a great signs that, we can go forward. That Liverpool game last week was very disappointing. Of course, you can't go 4-0 down and then suddenly think, OK, we've got a game to play here. The second half, the last 30 minutes or so was a lot better from Spurs. But yeah, I completely agree with you. But I do think that, a number of personnel changes need to happen. We've seen what Ange Postecoglou can do. And I think that that's what gives a lot of Spurs fans the hope. But I think the eyes now, as I said earlier, are on the board to heavily back him.
But do the eyes have to be on Ange himself as well, Chris? Because with the greatest of respect, we're not talking about the Australian League. We're not talking about the Japanese League. Tony's played for the great Celtic. We're not talking about playing Ross County. I'm being respectful here. Do you not accept he has to look at the granular detail now, whether that be set pieces? You can't say, well, I'm not interested in set pieces. We're talking about the very, very highest level of football that there is.
Yeah, I agree. I know what you're saying, Mark. And, he's been successful everywhere he's gone. The Premier League is completely different. I know you've said that in the most respectful way. I think he does need to adapt in certain games and look at set pieces, certainly, because I think not only a number of personnel changes within the Tottenham Hotspur squad, I think there will be a number of personnel changes in the backroom staff as well in the summer, because this has been a learning curve for him as well. I think that he's learnt a lot in his first season in the Premier League. But I know I keep harping back to it, getting European football. We've had no European football this season, which is terrible for a club like Tottenham. If we are back in the Europa League, and mathematically there is still a chance, although probably unlikely that we'll get a Champions League spot, it has been a success. But yes, I do agree. In certain games, he does need to adapt. He does need to change. But I think that all of us Spurs fans have seen enough signs to think that we want this manager to succeed, because, since Pochettino left in 2019, we've had 7 managers, 7 different coaches in the dugout. So, eventually we've got to say, look, we've got to back this guy. We've seen enough. We've seen enough signs, to be positive and successful as a football club. And, we haven't won a trophy in 16 years. And I cannot wait for the likes of Heung-min Son to finally lift one. And hopefully that will be under Ange when he does, adapt and change a few things in games.
Look, you lost Harry Kane in the summer. Your biggest transfer, in my opinion, was James Maddison, who was superb for large parts of this season, has now found himself out of the team. And yes, he's had an injury, but I would be concerned because, he was a major part of the rebuild that once Harry Kane left, and it looks like his future is a little bit more uncertain now. Would you agree with that, Chris?
A little. He's had a bad injury. He's come back, and of course it takes time for some players to get back to that level again, which I'm sure we will see. But you mentioned the word rebuild there. Although James Maddison is a big part of the rebuild, and I do like the transfer window last summer, and I thought it was a great window for Tottenham, particularly getting business done early. We are still going through that major rebuild. We haven't replaced Harry Kane. I know a lot of people say, well, how can you replace Harry Kane? But in terms of a striker, it might look like Richarlison will head out the door as well. You've got to think that we are still going through a major rebuild. A lot of players still need to head out the door, and there are so many areas for improvement still. So there is a lot still to happen.
I think there'll be quite a big turnover, Chris, don't you? You mentioned there Richarlison, saw Basuma yesterday in the paper, who started the season, bit like Tottenham's form, started the season well, trailed off. I think there'll be quite a big churn in the summer, don't you, Chris?
Absolutely. There will be a massive, incomings, outgoings. When you talk about signings as well, Tanguy Ndombele was our record signing, £65 million. He's currently on loan out in Turkey. Lo Celso, as well, I expect him to go out the door. When you talk about those players, Spurs have spent £100 million. Spurs often get criticised for not spending money in a transfer window. We have spent money, but recently we've spent it badly. But since Postecoglou has come in, the 2 transfer windows have been very clever, very quick signings, which we're not used to as Spurs fans. And I think that has been a dramatic change. But I do expect another massive window, ins and outs. Ange wants to progress the football club. He wants to, he said in various press conferences, he wants to challenge at the highest level. And, he's got to have the tools to do that.
Chris, let's have a bit of fun to finish with, yeah?
Go on.
So, Man City win today. Arsenal win tomorrow. Yeah, of course. I'd be disappointed if you... I know the answer I'm expecting you to say. Tell me what you want to happen in the Man City game. Your Man City game.
Mark, I have never ever said that I don't want Spurs to win a Premier League game, but I do think that Manchester City are an extremely tough team to play. As we all know, they're treble winners, Foden, Haaland, De Bruyne and co. They're going to probably come and beat Spurs anyway. Of course, no one's going to want to see Arsenal lift the Premier League title, but I think Man City, I've said it all season, I think Man City are so strong, I think they'll go on to lift the title.
That's a brilliantly political way of saying you want Man City to win without saying you want Man City to win. Chris, you should be standing in the general election coming soon for answering a question without answering it.
You know what I would say, Mark, is that...
No, Chris, I get you all the way. Of course I get you all the way. This is the whole point of football, isn't it?
Do you know what I would say? The under-21s have done extremely well this season. They've won Premier League too. So, perhaps give some of them a go in the game. But I would also like to say that, Spurs are quite, bantered a lot about not winning trophies. The Spurs women have an opportunity to win the FA Cup tomorrow. So good luck to them. and the under-21s are in the Premier League Cup final next Thursday, so very best of luck to them.
What was it? Sorry, just before you go, what was the thing I read about the under-21s this week? A lot of Tottenham fans were going, "This is the most Spursy thing of all because we've won this league, but we're not." What was the story, Chris?
Basically, the Spurs under-21s have been on fire this season. They finished first, and this season it's a new format. So every team goes into a playoff. So first now plays 16th, second plays 15th, and so on. Spurs won the game against Aston Villa the other day. They're in action tomorrow against Liverpool. So they're in the quarterfinals. So we need to play a few more games before we actually get the trophy.
Despite finishing first. Yeah, brilliant. Chris,
cheers, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Tottenham Burnley exclusively on talkSPORT 2 today, presented by Chris Latcham, commentary Ian Danter, former Burnley striker Chris Wellerman. Just before we go to the break, I think I said to you outside, if you flip their seasons, Tottenham, if they started how they're playing now and then finish the way they played in August and September, that's the irony of football, isn't it? Everyone go, 5th, brilliant, well done, European football.
Done fantastic. The conversation will be done fantastic. We're on an upwards trajectory. We're going the right direction. Great, looking forward to next season. Now it's, we need a lot of work to be done in the summer. And, I agree with that. I agree they do need stuff. But I'm not convinced that, this window is going to make ultimately the difference that a lot of Tottenham fans think it will.
It's going to take more than that. It all takes 2 or 3,
doesn't
it?
It feels like a lot more than just one window now. Yeah. And that's why I mentioned Maddison, because he's gone from, I know he had a bad injury, but he's gone from being the main really transfer from last summer. Now he's not going to make the Euros with the England squad, and
and if you look back at what happened at Leicester, he had seasons like this, didn't he? He was brilliant for 2 or 3 months. Look back at the FA Cup final win. He was on the bench.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He was brilliant for 2 or 3 months. Yeah. Get an injury, takes a bit of time to get back. It looks like a 10-month consistency is what he needs to strive for, and he can't always get it. So up next, we will take a look at the big sports stories on the back pages.